All right, listen up, cadets. Let's dive right into today's explainer, which serves as an after-action briefing on one of the most unprecedented domestic terror threats in American history. We're talking about the Symbionese Liberation Army and, of course, their most infamous operation, the kidnapping of Patty Hearst. We're going to analyze this case study from the ground up, looking at exactly how a small extremist cell challenged constitutional authority and, honestly, fundamentally changed modern police tactics.
Now keep this quote from former FBI Director Clarence Kelly right at the forefront of your mind throughout this briefing. Violence was a means of last resort. Now it is a method of communication. The SLA didn't just want to commit crimes to fund a criminal enterprise. No, they actively wanted to weaponize the media to cow the public and intimidate lawful authorities. For them, terrorism was, quite literally, their method of communication.
Here is our briefing syllabus for today. First, the SLA case file. Second, the Hearst kidnapping and media. Third, SWAT and the shootout. Fourth, victim or accomplice. And fifth, tactical legacy. Okay, moving to Section 1, the SLA case file, understanding the threat. Let's start by looking at how this group formed. In the fall of 1973, things coalesced around an escaped convict named Donald DeFreeze, who gave himself the title General Field Marshal Cinque and Patricia Soltysik. They formed in California, and wow, they wasted absolutely no time escalating to lethal violence. By November of that same year, they assassinated Oakland School Superintendent Marcus Foster, and they justified this murder by issuing a so-called warrant from their own fabricated court of the people. Right out of the gate, they are signaling a direct, violent challenge to constitutional authority. So what made these guys tick? Their ideological framing is really crucial here. As law enforcement professionals, we've got to understand their extremist political motivations neutrally to properly break down their operational tactics. The SLA viewed themselves as a vanguard movement, seeking political symbiosis, basically a united front of various left-wing struggles like anti-racism and anti-capitalism. Their end goal? The violent destruction of the capitalist state and the prison system. They even used a seven-headed Hydra cobra as their insignia to represent this multifaceted insurgency. Pretty intense stuff. To actually execute this ideology, they operated strictly as urban guerrillas. Now, this is a really vital distinction to make. Unlike your orthodox Marxist revolutionaries who usually focused on building mass, grassroots movements, the SLA didn't do that. They strictly adhered to Carlos Margella's mini manual of the urban guerrilla. What does that mean for us? It meant they prioritized immediate, violent expropriations, think bank robberies, kidnappings, to simultaneously fund and advertise the revolution. Which brings us to Section 2, the Hearst kidnapping and media. Weaponizing communications. This is where the SLA moves to their highest profile target, an operation explicitly designed for maximum visibility. On February 4, 1974, they abducted 19-year-old newspaper heiress Patty Hearst from her Berkeley apartment. At first, they demanded her wealthy father, Randolph Hearst, fund a massive food distribution program. Well, it was a total disaster. Crowds panicked at the distribution sites in West Oakland, leading to full-blown riots and injuries. But then, on April 3rd, the case took a massive, shocking turn. Hearst releases an audio tape announcing she had joined the SLA, calling herself Tanya, and declared her intent to, quote, stay and fight. Listen up on this point, guys, because it's the core takeaway of this phase. The SLA successfully forced a prominent, incredibly wealthy family to negotiate in public. By making astronomical demands, we're talking up to $400 million in food distribution, they didn't just hold a hostage, they completely hijacked the national conversation. They turned a tactical hostage situation into this daily, chaotic media spectacle that deliberately undermines legitimate social authority. And you can see the immediate impact this had on our profession. In the October 1974 FBI Law Enforcement Bulletin, published right in the thick of this whole era, law enforcement recognized, almost overnight, an urgent, absolutely critical need to formalize hostage negotiation protocols and psychological strategies to counter these exact types of media-driven terroristic tactics. Because, you see, the SLA's greatest weapon wasn't their firearms, it was the airwaves. It was their deliberate cultivation of fear by hijacking the broadcast systems. They sent high-quality audio communiques to local radio stations. They forced Hearst to record these chilling messages denouncing her own family's wealth, which gave them incredible propaganda value. They just relentlessly exploited the media's hunger for the story, broadcasting their ideology directly into millions of living rooms across the country. Moving to Section 3, SWAT and the shootout. Let's look at the law enforcement response. After Hearst's infamous transition from a hostage to a wanted felon, law enforcement really had to shift gears from negotiation to direct tactical engagement. The timeline escalated so rapidly. In April, Hearst is famously photographed wielding an assault rifle during the SLA's robbery of the Hibernia Bank in San Francisco. Then, a month later, May 16th, she literally fires a machine gun into Mel's Sporting Goods in LA to rescue her SLA comrades from a botched shoplifting incident. The very next day, that trail of evidence leads the LAPD to a small house in South Central Los Angeles, kicking off a massive shootout. So we have a really stark tactical matchup here. On one side, you have the SLA's erratic, hit-and-run urban guerrilla playbook, where militants actively chose martyrdom over surrender. And on the other side, the evolving, highly structured deployment of police special weapons and tactics, or SWAT. The police had to respond to this totally unprecedented threat with massive perimeter containment and ultimately overwhelming firepower.
The resulting siege was just unlike anything anyone had seen before. You've got helicopters circling above, ground units locking down the entire neighborhood, and the whole firefight is being broadcast live on television to a global audience. This was a massive pivot point. It forever changed how domestic counterterrorism operations were executed by police and how they were consumed by the public in real time.
5,000. I want you to let that number sink in for a second. During that single engagement on May 17th, LAPD officers fired an estimated 5,000 rounds of ammunition into that hideout. 5,000! And the SLA, they just continually returned fire, even as tear gas ignited the building and smoke was literally searing their lungs. 6 SLA members, including Donald DeFreeze, died in that blazing inferno. But, plot twist, Patty Hearst was not among them. All right, Section 4, victim or accomplice, the legal controversy. Turns out, Hearst was actually hiding in a motel near Disneyland during the shootout. She went on the run, traveling across the country as a fugitive before finally being apprehended in September 1975 in a San Francisco safe house. Her trial kicked off in early 1976, and man, it immediately became this landmark psychological case study. On March 20th, 1976, she was convicted of the Hibernia Bank robbery. Now, cadets, this question right here, this is the absolute crux of the legal debate surrounding this entire saga. Does a victim of a violent kidnapping bear criminal responsibility for acts committed alongside her captors? Where exactly is that line between survival instinct and ideological conversion? In the courtroom, the battle lines were drawn sharp. F. Lee Bailey, leading the defense, leaned heavily into this very novel concept at the time, Stockholm Syndrome. He argued she was kept in a closet, abused, given LSD, and effectively brainwashed. The prosecution, on the flip side, pointed straight to the hard physical evidence. I mean, she was photographed holding an assault rifle. She recorded these highly articulate tapes declaring her intent to fight. And, crucially, she had traveled independently across the country when she easily could have escaped. Ultimately, the jury sided with the prosecution. Finally, Section 5, Tactical Legacy and the Lessons for Law Enforcement Today. Decades later, the implications of this case are still with us. Despite the jury's conviction, executive clemency dramatically altered the historical record. President Jimmy Carter actually commuted her 7-year sentence after just 22 months. Then, on his last day in office in 2001, President Bill Clinton granted her a full pardon. It's a really fascinating historical contrast. This executive action cemented her status in the public eye as a victim. Happening right around the exact same time, the remaining SLA fugitives were finally pleading guilty to their crimes in the early 2000s. From an operational standpoint, the SLA barricade incidents were a real game changer. They catalyzed a massive evolution and, frankly, the militarization of police forces. Back in the 1970s, SWAT was deployed strictly for reactive emergencies. Hostages, snipers, extreme unrest. But today, we've seen an evolution toward police paramilitary units, or PPUs, conducting proactive, dynamic entries. The SLA showed us that domestic extremists could match patrol officers in firepower, and the police structure fundamentally adapted to make sure that would never, ever happen again. So, as we wrap up this briefing, I want to leave you with a final thought to chew on. The SLA proved that a tiny group of extremists could paralyze a city and captivate the globe just by turning violence into a media spectacle. Ask yourselves, in our modern era of instant, global, digital media, how do we counter an adversary whose primary objective isn't just to inflict harm, but simply to be heard. Class dismissed.